Good afternoon, everyone. I want to call to order the regular monthly meeting. And I'm reminded that I need to announce that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded. So stay out of the views of the camera if you don't want to be part of that recording process, please. I see with the absence of John Felton at the moment that we have a quorum. So I'd like to ask Herm Hess, if he'd be our timekeeper. 3 minutes. Thank you. And if the secretary would be our taskmaster, I would appreciate it. The next item, number 3 on our agenda, is the members' open forum. There's a microphone off to my right over here for anybody who has any thoughts they'd like to share before we get into the meat of the meeting. Seeing nobody anxious to stand up and be recognized.
I don't know, do you need a microphone?
Yeah, please.
Bill Moore is my name. Microphone probably were better than on. Is there a trick to that? I went to public school. I don't know how to turn this on. Perhaps I should attempt to be loud. Does that work? One, two, three, can you hear me? It's better. It's still off.
We need an adjustment, I think.
Here's one of the other microphones. Is that better? Can you hear me? It works. Bill Moore is my name, 132 Oak Island Circle. I've been made aware that there's possibly going to be dramatic changes to one or more of the golf courses. These changes are going to impact everybody's property values here, specifically those people living on a golf course. I expect it's going to be dramatic. Yet I don't see anything in the newspapers. I don't hear anything. I wonder if you might enlighten me, if this board might enlighten me or enlighten the residents here as exactly what's going to transpire. I would appreciate that. Thank you. I've heard that they're going to put native grasses in big chunks of the golf courses. This is to preserve water that they're losing through the gray water. It's going to have a dramatic effect on both golf courses. I've also heard a rumor, I don't know where this comes from, that the smaller course will be closed. Native grasses in Sonoma County, I'm not sure what they are. If they're desert grasses, that potentially is a fire hazard. Certainly it will impact everybody's property value, and again, specifically those people living on the golf course, dramatically impact them. And I don't know why we don't hear from anybody, the golf folks or OVA, or I'm real concerned about this, and I need to know.
All I can tell you is that there have been no official communication from the golf course about their development plans relative to the water agreement they reached with the city of Santa Rosa about 1.5 years ago. In that agreement, there were provisions to close down temporarily. They had a better term than close down on it, but to stop using the current water treatment plant that's located out to the west because of the cost of that operation. And the water department of the city agreed to pay the golf course something on the order of $2.8 million in order to refurbish the sprinkler systems of the golf courses and to change the pattern of grasses so that there was low maintenance grass on parts of the fairways that weren't considered traditional turf for golfing. It also included the possibility of building a pond to store more water in the vicinity of the current driving range. And I'm sure there were other ramifications to that that were negotiated between the city and the golf club. OVA has not received any notice or any reports of where they stand in that progress. I have personally not heard any rumors about closing. I do know that some of my golf playing friends have said that the golf club is about ready to have a membership meeting in which they would report to their members what the progress is on this conversion from city water recycle to water the golf courses to a combination of golf club owned well water and a less demanding water supply due to the changes in the turf. So we'll be the first to seek that information when they make it available. I don't know if it's being available now.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that you talk to the golf people and make this a standing agenda item on every one of your meetings. There's probably nothing on your agenda that's as impactful as this could be to this community.
Thank you for the suggestion. We'll see if we can do that. Richard?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I can address partially some of the questions raised by...
More like a snow cone.
I can address some of the questions asked by Mr. Moore concerning the golf course. There will be an article in the Oakmont News coming up, I believe, on August 15th, which addresses this very issue and the plans that the golf course have for redistributing some of the irrigated areas and covering them with native grasses. From my conversations with the golf course representative, it appears that their plans are going to be most exceedingly attractive for the owners of Oakmont property. And I would like to try and allay your fears at this stage that there will be any diminution of those values. I think the plans are very good, and in fact, it may be an enhancement. So I hope that will reassure you temporarily.
Thank you, Richard. Barbara?
Hi, I'm Barbara Robinson, 9449 Oak Trail Circle. I have a question. I saw something in the paper recently, and I've heard from other Oakmont residents that there's a possibility that people are actually renting out their homes for vacationers. Is that, are we taxing that? Is that tax? Are we following that at all? Is anybody concerned? I know the people where it's happening in their neighborhood are concerned. I've heard from them, but I just wanted to bring that up. I didn't know if you'd seen that. I saw it advertised in the Oakmont News as far as a phone number and who to call as far as a house that was being used and rented on occasion for vacationers. So I didn't know about the safety of that, the concern with that. And like I said, some of the neighbors have been concerned about the noise of it and not knowing who's coming and going. So just wanted to bring that up, see if it's something you might want to look into. Or if you already had, then what's been looked into?
Well, I know the question that you bring up is in fact going on. You can see brochures in the real estate offices that list properties that they're representing for short period rentals. OVA, unless there's a complaint about noise or improper use of facilities or things like that, doesn't have any control over that particular situation.
Okay, so then people who have personal concerns who may be close to it need to just bring it to you and say whatever their concern is and then see what OVA can do about it at that time?
I would think that would have to happen.
Okay, what happens with, I mean, are they, I'm looking towards Patricia because I'm sure you probably know, hi. Isn't there like a tax, like a bed tax? I mean, is that something the city's, what's it called? Transit occupancy tax. Is that something followed by the city, not OVA then?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thanks.
And just so you know, this vacation rental thing was going on before I arrived. It's not new.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you all. I'm going to defer my president's announcements because they involve some people that are not able to be here until 2 o'clock. So we'll go directly to the secretary's summaries of the executive sessions.
The executive session held.
You need your microphone.
At the executive session held June 18th, it convened at 3:25 p.m. All board members were present, including myself and Patricia Arnold. There were also members of the Facilities Improvement Committee present regarding the issues they were there regarding. And that committee and the board discussed and reviewed the status of the bidding on the plaza contract with the Facilities Improvement Committee and provided direction to the committee to expeditiously continue its efforts to obtain bids within the range of the original estimate. The board also reviewed and discussed 3 delinquent accounts and unanimously voted to refer them to collection. The board considered enforcement of a decision of the Architectural Committee regarding a homeowner's failure to park their vehicles in the garages. The homeowner was present and represented that he was sure to be in compliance. The board discussed the problems of enforcement of that rule regarding the use of garages and agreed the issue in this case was now moot. The meeting adjourned at 4:15.
And I'm reporting on the second executive session that we had on Wednesday, July the 10th at 11 a.m. in the morning. We covered 2 items. One was a personnel matter. That matter resulted in the appointment of a manager selection committee chaired by Bill Anderson, and it amounted to the appointment of members of that committee that include Brian Adams, Pat Amadeo, Kathleen Conley, Bob Giddings, Stan Lindsay, Noel Lyons, and Mike Noble. It also included various instructions regarding authorizing the committee to employ headhunters to assist in the attraction of candidates for the job opening that we had, discussion of the manager's job description, and the requirement that the committee bring back to the board for consideration a list of 4 to 6 of the most qualified candidates that they're able to develop from the search process. Item number 5 on the agenda is ratification of actions taken outside the board meeting. There is only one, and that amounts to the approval of the reserve analysis consulting contract to do our annual reserve analysis update. Once every 3 years, we have to do an on-site individual review of properties that are on the reserve analysis. The other 2 years in that cycle, we can do it by an update process. And this is an update year, and it involves a contract to help us in that regard for $1,250. This was reviewed and recommended by the treasurer, authorized by me. It involves, you may be interested to know, over 650 items that we have in our reserve analysis program, stretching projections of reserves for these items over a period of up to 30 years. So I'd appreciate a motion to ratify the action to employ reserve analysis consulting for $1,250 for for this year's required review.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Thank you. Item 6 is our consent calendar. I have a motion to adopt the consent calendar item.
I have a question first.
Yes.
One quick question. Marjorie Noble, is that a different Noble?
It's not Marlene's.
Thank you. Just,
John, I'll make the motion to
Moved by
approve.
Herman Hess, seconded by Evelyn George. All in favor? Adopting the consent calendar. We next have the treasurer's report. Chuck, help.
For the month of June, we had revenue of $178,000 with expenses of $147,000, leaving us a surplus for the month of almost $31,000. On a year-to-date basis, halfway through the year, revenues of $1,025,000 and expenses of $884,000, which is 7% less than budget, leaving us a surplus of $141,000. On a year-to-date basis, contribution to the funds are all equal to or better than budget, with the Orchard area selling 12 new homes, giving us $311,000. Cash in the various accounts: operating fund, $660,000, asset replacement, $1,475,000, capital improvement, $1,133,000, and catastrophe, $96,000, leaving us a total cash of $3,363,000.
Thank you. Do you have a further report for the board?
Yes, the board needs to accept the report.
Motion to accept the treasurer's report. Herman, second by Herman Hess. All in favor? Thank you.
It's a requirement for the board to review the status of the asset reserve fund at least quarterly and report to the residents. For 2013, the monthly transfer was to be almost $34,000 a month. We have transferred that exact amount each month and will continue for the rest of the year. It's also a requirement to review the bank reconciliations quarterly. I have reviewed the bank reconciliations by CFM and have verified the amounts to the balance sheet and bank statements.
Thank you. Do we need to adopt anything? Next item is number 8 on the manager's report. You've all had the manager's report in your packet. Are there any questions? Members of the audience also have it part of the handout for the meeting. If there are any questions from the audience, I'm glad to have those as well. Seeing no signs of questions, I want to go on to any committee recommendations. Item number 9, I think, is the Finance Committee recommendation on the Burger Plaza Phase 1. Do you have any comments on that? Anybody from the audience make any comments about that?
I just have a quick question, John. When we're talking about phase 1, we're talking about phase 1 of phase 1, am I correct? Phase 1, part 1.
Yes, it's not the original concept that was phase 1, it's a portion of that.
A portion, right.
To my knowledge, we don't have a permit from the city yet to proceed. Just to be sure we're all on the same page, we have an application into the city and have had for 8 weeks. They tell us that their average is 8 to 12 weeks in granting such permit approvals. But in the meantime, the Facility Improvement Committee has come up with an analysis of the bids that they've received that divides the immediate plaza project between a Part 1 in front of the Burger Auditorium, directly behind all of you, and a Part 2 out here to what would would be the audience's right to be done at a second stage. That is not part of this recommendation that we have in our package. Kathleen?
Yes, last month, Pat Amadeo suggested that perhaps someone from the board or the Facilities Maintenance Committee call a city council member, Ernesto Oliveras, who's a friend of Oakmont, to help facilitate the permit through the process. And I know for a fact that that could happen and would happen if that call was made, so one might think about that.
Thank you.
Patricia? Didn't you have a firm date from the city as to when we would get the permit?
The firm date is at the end of, was it 8 weeks, 12 weeks, or whatever, and it keeps, it's a moving target, but whenever they give it to me, it's a firmly moving target.
But I thought you gave us an actual date in July.
No, I gave you the date we started, and then we're doing the countdown, that's why we know we're at 8 weeks now. They had said originally 6 to 8 weeks, and now it's 8 to 12 weeks, or I think it was 8 to, I've lost track, because the number that I get from the city keeps changing. But I think that Ken Carr with Hogan Land Services has an in with the person that he's dealing with, and I'm confident that he's moving on as fast as he can, although making a phone call to somebody in the higher echelons might make a big difference.
John, I would recommend that I might call Julie Combs, the city, and try and find out if we can get a date as to when we can expect the permit.
I would see nothing wrong with that as long as we don't cross hairs with what Ken Hogan is trying to do for us. So let's be sure that you do that in conjunction with his efforts rather than independent conversation. Unless others on the board see it differently. Yes.
Eleanor Brodnansky, 7495 Oakmont Drive. The members of the task force for this plaza project have talked about the fact that we are not going to get this project done before the 50th anniversary. There's no way that's going to happen. And it looks pretty bad out there. So we've talked about possibly leasing some plants, having a nursery, place them around just for that weekend or the few days that the events are going on, and then have the nursery pick them up, because we don't want to have to try to be responsible for plants and their care. So I just want to put that out there.
I appreciate those comments. Standing behind you is Sue Millar, who's chair of the committee, and I know she's been doing some things in that regard. Perhaps the two of you could coordinate on it. Maybe Sue has a comment.
Well, I do have a comment. I have been working with Tim, and we discussed the plaza and tried to kind of mark it out and where would we put canopies and things like that. And he has told me that he spoke with Connie with Scandia Landscaping, and that he has said that he would be happy to kind of flatten out and make those dirt areas a little more attractive and maybe lend us some plants. I've been kind of working on that. I did get I did speak to Prickett's. Problem is, we can borrow plants, but we have to transport them in a covered truck and return them and sign up for congressional overview to make sure that we've watered them and taken care of them and so forth, and it sounded like it would be kind of complicated. So I'm going to work with Scandy and Eleanor. I wouldn't mind having some help on that. Okay, thanks a lot.
I think that takes care of item 9 and item 10, unless you have some other comments, Art. Thank you. Item 12, new business items.
Excuse me, John, did you guys want to vote on that or not, or the recommendation for the plaza?
I think we don't have anything specific.
Well, yeah, you've got a recommendation to approve up to $300,000 for Phase 1 park lots.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I'm not ready to put that item on the agenda for approval until we have a building permit.
Okay.
I believe we need to see whether or not there are any catches in what the city comes up with. Any objection from the board? Thank you for the reminder. Item 12 is new business items, focusing first of all in item A, B, and C on the West Rec Center. And I think before we get started on talking about any individual item like that, I want to share with other members of the board the helpful work that the treasurer did after our workshop 2 weeks ago. He took the spreadsheet that we discussed containing 25 potential items that we might rank, and he took a look at funding those items over the period 2013 through 2016. And so I'm able to hand out to you each a copy of both the asset replacement fund projection work that he did and the capital improvement fund projection work that he did. Because I think one of the obvious questions that we all have and that residents have is, where's the money coming from to do these items that cumulatively could be very expensive? And how does it fit into our budget development for 2014? And does it have any implications for special assessments or significant dues increase as the years go ahead? So I think that you can see he very effectively illustrated that with the right kind of planning, even using these simple projected funds that don't reflect actual contracts, that we're in the position to fund the kind of activities that we have talked about that are both safety related and improvement related. But I'd like to have him make any comments that he wants to help us better understand.
Yes, 2 comments. Based on these financial estimates as well as the timeline, at the end of 2014, we would have an asset reserve cash balance of $113,000, and the current minimum that the board, previous boards have set is $300,000 for the asset reserve. So we would be under that by, 2/3. However, at the end of 2015, it goes back up to $400,000. And if you look at both the asset replacement reserve and the capital improvement fund, at the end of 2014 would have $196,000 in cash. And this is also assuming that we take out a loan for the office building, a 10-year loan with payments that would be about equal to the monthly rent that we're currently paying.
So I thought it would be helpful for all of us to keep this kind of background in mind as we continue to wrestle with the various approval steps that are necessary to move forward with the challenges that we face. Herman had the suggestion that because there's an interrelationship between the West Rec Center structural corrections, the possible development of an alternative shower locker room facility at the west, and a seismic analysis at the west, that we suspend the rules for 10 minutes and kind of get any comments that individuals want to make about those before we address them individually. One of the offer?
We received, I had in my inbox this morning a quote or a potential bid, I guess, from a firm here regarding a seismic analysis of the West Rec building. read through that seismic, or that proposal, and I don't find a heck much different in that than we've already done as far as our forensic study previously. They are not planning to do any invasive inspections. Now, I have no idea myself, and this is why when I asked the engineers in the group, I have no idea myself whether you can do a structural analysis from a seismic standpoint without seeing what's inside the walls. When we got an estimate, or an opinion, I should say, from our architects, Archeologic, that building had a 10 to 15 year life. They were evidently basing that, and it is an opinion only, on what they have found when they opened up the walls at the old buildings that were part of the CAC. It seems to me that before we can make any decisions whatsoever on the West Rec, we need to know exactly the structural integrity of that building. And this is why I'm asking whether this seismic study would give us that information, or whether we need to do something besides that. There are so many variables as to what we might do with that building. If that building is structurally sound, then we can make many repairs to the building that wouldn't trigger any code compliance. I'm talking about replacing the heating systems, replacing electrical systems, replacing plumbing, and so forth. These would not trigger, from what I understand anyway, these would not trigger new code compliance. If the building is not structurally sound, well, then we need to start looking right now, planning ahead as to what we are eventually going to do with that building. Because we know that they've changed the setback requirements, so we don't know that we can ever rebuild it or not. So this is why I wanted to find out from exactly what this proposed seismic study would tell us. Will it very definitely give us an opinion on the structural integrity of that building? Can anybody answer that question?
Jim Cotton has been helpful in obtaining the proposal that you have in your board packet, and I'd like Jim to comment on what he sees. But I'd like to preface that by saying the forensic analysis from Axis, their subcontractor who did the structural analysis of the building, said it specifically does not include analyzing the seismic characteristics of that building. So they made some recommendations about structural changes, which is what item 12A focuses on in your package. But at the February workshop session that the board had, they discussed that in addition to that information, and in addition to Archeologic's analysis of what our options might be, that we would still need a seismic analysis to have the whole picture. So Jim has just stepped in to see if he can offer us something in that regard.
Hello, can you hear me? Well, we don't have a seismic analysis. We have a seismic engineer finding discrepancies. But there is such a thing that's been developed by the ASCE and the Structural Engineers Institute, which are both high-level seismic developing agencies for codes throughout the world. They travel around whenever there's an earthquake. They have developed a code that's exactly what we want, and the latest edition is just out. They worked on it another 6 or 7 years. That is the gold standard. If they say that the building is safe, they're not saying it will improve. The existing Axis report, the sub-report, the structural, said that if you tighten some of these bolts, the building will perform better in a seismic event. Whereas this report, which is very low cost compared to the previous reports we've spent either 30 or 60,000 on, something like 6,000, they have this modern method that addresses existing buildings, especially wood frame buildings such as this, and they say whether or not it is safe by modern standards, yes or no. And so that is what a lot of managers would like to have, or insurance agencies, because this way you know, or you know that it's not safe or it is safe. Not that there are certain, what we all would call punch list discrepancies where a contractor missed this or that, or there's small things. This analyzes existing buildings specifically. So I recommend, and so does my friend Ben Albert, who may not be here. Both of us are formerly licensed structural engineers. That this is a very cheap way to put a lot of worries to rest.
Can you tell us, though, does the process, as Herm Herman was inquiring, is it an invasive process? Do they have to tear into the building in order to conduct it?
They don't have to tear in much more because the earlier processes did, and they will make recommendations perhaps for some fixes. I mean, I know they will, because even without the fixes, it's probably safe building by the new standards, I would guess. There's so much shear wall both directions. And, but they will make the decision. They won't exclude that. They have to do whatever they think is necessary to guarantee this report, this building meeting the standards of the report. So I don't, their price, maybe the wording of their proposal, I didn't watch it too carefully, but I think they want to talk to the existing structural engineer as to what his criteria was for invasive. So you wouldn't tear the whole building down just to find every last thing. You make some assumption.
This proposal from this Sandra Fell firm specifically excludes any invasive procedure. It's specifically in their proposal.
Well, it could be then that they would have a time and materials change order if they thought there was enough additional invasive. It's not contradicting their ability to recommend or condemn the building. The details.
John, might I add something to all that? The first step is to go in under item 12A and fix all the things that Axis identified as being problem areas. If you have any hopes of being able to pass the seismic test standard that Jim mentioned, the fact that they will do the work in accordance with that standard gives you the assurances that the building will meet a certain level of a seismic event. They are not going to do, as you mentioned, evasive, which is really a destructive test. They're not going to do destructive testing, but they will go in and evaluate best they can from what they've seen so far and what has been exposed to them. And they will end up certifying that the building meets the requirements of the standard.
Thank you. Any other discussion before we start through the individual items?
Yeah, if you would. Okay, so in response to Herm Herman, okay, he says, reading the proposal, there's not going to be any evasive inspection done. So what we're saying, there's not going to be any new information brought to light at this point. These people are going to sit there and review the information that 3 previous firms have already looked at, right, and come up with a decision. Now, it would seem to me, even with the seismic, I'm trying to, and in Axis, and none of them said in their reports that anything had to be done due to seismic, that they had a lot of problems with the way the structure was, bolts not being done and missing and so forth like that, some of the shear walls. they had a bigger problem with a lot of the systems, HVAC, electrical, and everything like that. That was their biggest point. And even, I believe, Archaeologics confirmed everything that they had said. We went up for a second opinion to confirm everything said. So I guess what I'm trying to find out is exactly what this fourth party...
Jim, what you need to do, you need to read the standard to see what's going to be done. Axis never referred to the standard or did anything in accordance with it.
And they didn't say they did.
That's right, and so that's a weakness.
For what?
But I think we're having...
It's a subjective review as opposed to an objective.
I guess what we're having trouble doing is understanding what we're going to learn from the seismic analysis.
What I expect to see from the seismic analysis are professional certified engineers that are trained in a specific area. They use the international gold standard as it was brought out. Inspections that aren't based on standards don't mean anything, as far as I'm concerned, in my experience. I think it's imperative that we do the seismic test to find out whether our building is worth fixing up or not. If it turns out that after we do these minor repairs that were suggested, that the seismic report comes back and says, this building is potentially a problem, and that you've got a risk here to deal with, there's no point in spending a lot of money to fix it up. It doesn't make any sense. On the other hand, if they come back and say this building is safe, then I feel comfortable in voting to go ahead and make the necessary repairs to extend its life and safety and in other areas. But I think without a seismic test, an evaluation, and a report by professionals that are certified, we're foolish to proceed.
I think that we've exhausted our 10 minutes of general discussion and need to go back to the agenda, item one by one. You need to say something, Bob?
Bob Giddings, J.C. Lane. I don't understand all of this, and John and others are engineers, and Jim certainly. From my perspective, worrying about spending money on this building because of possible seismic deficiencies, I suspect we have seismic deficiencies in all our buildings, this one included. And we will continue to spend money on this and the East Rec also. Probably the Central is because of the newest, is probably up to code better than any one of them. Regarding spending money on the East, we do have an insurance cover for earthquake. And we do have a fund to cover our deductible should something occur. My thought during Jim's comments was $6,000 is very little to give us more information, and more information always makes better decisions. But should we find it somewhat deficient, although quite acceptable, it's probably quite acceptable like all the buildings in Oakmont, including the residences. Wood frame buildings. This happens to be two-story, but there's no weight load on top. And we have insurance cover. Should we spend money, we won't lose that money because it'll be recaptured back in the settlement of the insurance. I just wanted to add that, John. Thank you.
Well, my whole concern has been, once we get this test, can we rely on that to decide, okay, we can use that building, or we can't use that building over a period of 10 or 15 years? That's the decision we're going to have to make, and I hope that test will give us that information.
Let's go to item 12A then, please. This is an item regarding structural corrections at the West Rec Center. In the forensic analysis that the Axis firm did, they included specific items, relatively modest, of structural improvements such as tie downs, bolts, strapping, things of that nature. They included in their report an estimate of what the cost of doing that kind of work would be. Based on our workshop discussion 2 weeks ago, I I asked our manager to get in touch with Axis to get an actual bid to do that kind of work. And so you can see in the sheet that I passed out at the beginning of the meeting that Axis has come back listing the kinds of things that they would do at the foundation level by removing the stucco that's there and going in and checking against the sill plates and so forth where soil is in contact with that location. And they would do the same kind of removal at the juncture of the first and the second floor and make corrections that were identified at that location. And their bid is for $34,027.84. If we find that the city requires drawings of some type in order to let us proceed to do this, there'd be an additional $5,000 charge. But the board, back in January, identified making these structural corrections as an important safety item, regardless of whatever we might do downstream regarding that building. And so with that bit of background, I'm looking for a motion that we can pass or ignore to accept Axis bid to do this work. I realize one bidder is not our normal form of operation, but they're the ones that did the invasive testing, identification of the structure. And I hate to think of the kind of delays we face by going out to other bidders and having them do the same kind of thing. So that's why I'm looking for a motion based on one bid.
Could I make one statement before we proceed?
Let's get a motion first, please.
I'll move approval of this bid.
Yes, I would second the motion.
Thank you.
I'd like to have some feeling that this work would be done before they do the seismic tests.
Well, we'll get to that item on the agenda in a minute.
In our packet on page 40, we had one estimate, and you've just quoted and handed us a chart. Why was there an increase of over $3,000?
The first material that was included in the report that they made in January was made by the architectural side of the house at Axis. It didn't involve an actual interface on their part. They just wanted to give us a general ballpark figure. The bid that you have in front of you, based on the motion that Herb made, is an actual bid from the construction division of Axis.
And that's what we would be voting on.
That's what we voted.
I'm just going to say that Axis is way, way high on other things we've done. They're the designer and the bidder.
Any other discussion on the motion? Kathleen?
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, our bidding policy says that anything over a certain amount of money requires 3 sealed bids, not to be opened until they all come in together. I would feel that it would probably be best to go ahead and spend another week or two locally and see if we can find a bid that might meet our needs for less money.
Any other discussion? Jim?
Yes, as far as approving this, is this the point where you want to discuss if we would do this before or after the seismic analysis? Or
I'm assuming we're approving it to do first.
okay, yeah, because I mean, if the seismic analysis is going to show us what John and Herm says it was, then maybe you're saving yourself $34,000 by doing the seismic first.
Can you explain your thinking on that? Last week.
Well, you said the seismic analysis is going to sit there and tell us whether that building is in sufficient shape to either keep or not to do any repairs to. So if the seismic analysis is conducted, and these are some of the things they'll be looking at, okay? We're gonna sit there and look at some of these things, and then if they turn around and say, okay, your present condition in this building is such that it is satisfactory, and you can keep it, and it's good for 10, 15 years, whatever, and so that gives us an idea of doing repairs. But if they turn around and say, no, in its present condition, this is not, and they may make a list of things that you may do shortly to, rectify that, then they may recommend some of these things, or they may not have to. That's all I'm saying.
Jim, I understand what you're saying, except that the things that we want to fix here that have been identified are problem areas that will not allow you to pass the seismic test.
Oh, well, wait a minute. Now you just kind of walked into it. Now it's not going to pass the seismic test, is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is you'll fail the seismic test if you don't fix these things first.
I doubt it. I doubt it. I really think that it'll give you time to find a much, much cheaper contractor, and there may be less items.
Well, yes, but
access is suspect.
And then you turn around and they say, okay, if they fix these things, and you fix these things, and this is the small amount of invasive work that they've done. If you're going to sit there and tell me that you're going to do an seismic analysis only on planned drawings, that's not sufficient. You and I both know that. You and I have done enough seismic work that you got to have as-built, and you got to have the way it is actually. You can't sit there and go on what proposed was.
I just don't know what kind of seismic test would pass when you have these known flaws.
I'd like to make the observation that if the concern of the board is that we sequence this differently and do the seismic analysis, and based on that decide whether or not to proceed with the structural changes, that would give us time to go out and get additional bids. Take your choice on that process.
That sounds like a good idea. I just see a conflict of interest here with access.
So we have a motion in front of us to...
Well, Mr. Chairman, just one thing, just for everybody's evidence. Yes, our policy does state that we normally go out for a bid and get 3 bids. However, I believe that our policy also states that the board has the authority to make exceptions to that. All right? So just, just keep in mind, I think that's what Mr. Chairman was doing, just due to the expediting nature of the subject. He was trying to do that. He was not violating any policy. Policy provides him that alternative.
So we have a motion. She's through.
I just mentioned that I felt it was a conflict of interest to just hire access because
I'd just like to make another comment in regard to Jim's suggestion. I agree, Herm, that we probably can't pass a seismic with that deficiency. But if the seismic report comes up with things besides that are major, we will know that there's no, that we're going to have to do something serious with that building then. So that's another advantage of doing the seismic first, I think.
Would someone like to table this particular motion and bring it up after we've had the decision on the seismic?
I so move that we table this one.
I'll second.
All in favor? Item 12A is table. And let's skip to item 12C just to get this process moving more. This is the seismic analysis. The offer that we have in front of us is good for 30 days. It included not only a $6,800 expenditure for the seismic analysis of the 2-story building, but it also includes a proposed $2,800 expenditure for the seismic analysis of the cabana and pool equipment building. I would hope that in light of that unpermitted nature of the pool equipment building and cabana, that we wouldn't spend any money on a seismic analysis of it. So I'd appreciate a motion for a seismic analysis for $6,800 with the Wire Anderson Company.
I so move.
Moved by Jim and seconded by Fran.
What we're entertaining is the motion to do what? Explain again, please.
To accept bid from the Wire Anderson Company for $6,800 to do a seismic analysis of the West Rec Center two-story building.
Thank you.
Yes. Discussion? All in favor? Passed. Then let's go to item 12B. This is on the agenda because one of the other things that we need to know about that west facility is what the city and the water agencies are going to permit us to do, if anything, given the creek setback line. I offered you some thoughts in that connection in a cover note, but it simply says that city and water agency people are loath to provide any kind of approvals on an inquiry basis because they have been burned too many times by people coming in and talking about doing one thing and feeling that they have been given assurances that it would be okay, and then subsequently the plans came in, they weren't able to approve them because they had understood something different than what had been discussed in the previous conversation. And so this particular proposal is to say we need to go ahead and propose a specific improvement in the form of a swim center standalone building relatively in the vicinity that's shown there, outlined in yellow on the easel board on the far right. And we need to get that developed to the stage with a schematic design that we can submit an application for design review and approval from the authorities that are involved. And so I have received, and you have in your packet, a proposal from Archeologics to do this kind of work. It involves two different components because of the location. It involves, first of all, the schematic design of a building that would provide the facilities. And secondly, it involves a topographic site review in order to identify exactly structurally what that site can accommodate, whether it's retaining walls or other kinds of structures relative to the parking lot location. So to get this going, do we have a motion to accept the proposal from Archeologics following up on their options study at the west for $18,750 to do this next step in analysis?
I so move.
Moved by Evelyn, seconded by John. Discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Now, if we sit there and so let's say we follow through this train of thought and we're going to put this new building in, have we given thought of what we're going to do with the existing bathrooms and shower areas?
There's been thought and discussion of it, Jim. The concern is that those areas represent the same kind of structural difficulties that we're now trying to repair in the east. And so essentially they would be abandoned and the space used for storage.
Excuse me, John.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I weigh in on this for a moment? Our attention was brought to the need for toilet facilities and water facilities at the west in the event of an emergency. And I took the liberty of calling Archeologics and spoke with Mitch Connor and asked him to keep that in mind and some of the plans as we go forward. If this is approved, we could easily, he pointed out, break through those walls and retain the toilet facilities and the basin for water, removing, of course, all the shower stalls and locker rooms and so forth. So that should be something that we should keep in mind because of our commitment for emergency preparedness.
What does this commit us to as far as that shower, toilet building? What, if we're spending $17,000 or $18,000, what does that commit us to? Is that commit us, that's the direction we're going, or the West Rec?
In my mind, it does commit us beyond trying to find out what the city and the water agencies are going to permit us to do between the 30 and the 50-foot setback lines. It doesn't require us to build a building, but it's the only way that the professionals have advised us that we can know what we can do.
Thank you.
Because as we see, that 30 and 50-foot line influences the two-story building as well. If someone else has got a better idea as to how you go, I'm certainly open to it. Any other comments from the board?
Call a question.
Got a voice?
Nancy Caldwell, Mountain Vista Circle. Not with Kathleen, Mountain Vista Court. I have a question. Does anybody, or has anyone ever examined the possibility of simply building an equipment small building and refurbishing and doing whatever's necessary in the main building for the bathrooms and showers?
There have been proposals to spend $400,000 to redo the bathrooms and showers in the main building. And that's really one of the things that was put seriously on hold because of concerns that it, one, would trigger the additional accessibility regulations in further work.
That was a firm number.
In that building.
It was quite a firm number.
And there have also been the questions regarding that building as to whether or not we want to try and make changes in that two-story building as a long term. So we're talking about the seismic analysis and other things to know more about that main building.
Or other comments also in the proposed new building, are there going to be the saunas that the swimmers really like?
Part of the seismic, part of the schematic design is to develop exactly what would be in that building and what its dimensions are. So we would have to have a project team that puts it together just like we've had a project team for the central building.
And the last question, is Archaeologics definitely as firm that would be doing this?
I think we need to follow through with them because of our commitment with them relative to doing the options study there. We've already had their engineering people take a look at it. I don't see changing horses at this point.
I think it's important to not call this the swim center. There's no way this is just a new locker room, mainly for the ladies. That could be argued one way or another, that they're so bad you need to spend $750,000 for better locker rooms. All the swim activities in the east and in the central, both family and lap swimming and everything, there's a tiny trickle of people that swim in the west. And there's only one person that swam there more than me, that's Sumner Johnston, for 15, 20 years. There's hardly anybody come. There's some nearby people that enjoy it. And giving everybody a gold-plated shower room is not going to make that into a swim center. People go what's closest and what's nicest. Please use the right word. It's new locker rooms, not swim center. That's transparent. Politic.
I'd like to call the question about Archaeologics providing for $18,750 a schematic design for locker rooms and pool equipment building. All in favor? The motion passes. Thank you. Item 12D on our agenda is a good time in my mind to break back to the President's comments, which I skipped over at the beginning. I think we've got kind of an auspicious occasion today, and we've got really some significant people with us that have contributed that, and I just want to be sure that we recognize what they've accomplished and how our community is benefiting. Some of you, I'm sure, have kept track of the fact that 3 days ago, online, you could read the Oakmont News. And not only could I read the Oakmont News that appeared in the mail a few days later, but I also could read a story about how the city of Santa Rosa is going to block off my street to do a resurfacing project on the 2nd of August. And I could see pictures and photographs and so forth. And we've come a long way, and I think we need to recognize Marty Thompson, ably assisted by Deanne Smith, whose editorial team has been responsible for the Oakmont News' new content. We need to recognize Al Haggerty for the kind of contribution that he's made sitting in the front row of our meetings and beautifully reporting what's going on. I think we need to recognize Kelly Moody, the technical expert on our OVA office staff, who takes this kind of media and transmits it to the publisher for purposes of the hard copy press, but also is responsible for being sure that that information gets in its online form. And Marty, won't you and your team just stand up so we can really recognize you? Kelly's bashful. She's standing up clear in the back. But you know, she may not be bashful very much longer because Richard Duncan, our artist, there he is. Richard, would you take the microphone and eulogize the situation for us, please? Oh, eulogize, memorialize. Oh, poor choice of words. Can you take the microphone?
If I may have your indulgence, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to invite Kelly Moody to come up to the front, please. Before I get into this, I have to tell you that it has birthed in a little funny story that happened to me several months ago. In fact, it could be even a year ago or more. I have been following a rather interesting but controversial issue on what Tim Kaiser would call the social media, which afforded me a great amount of amusement at the time. And as it was my want, and as is my want, I thought this would be the subject for a big poem. So I wrote this poem and submitted it to the Oakmont News, where it was intercepted by Kelly Moody. So a short while later, I think it was either an email or a phone call from Kelly saying, you know, Richard, she admonished me very gently, I don't think that this poem is absolutely really appropriate for the Oakmont News. Would you please reconsider? So, suitably admonished, I took it back, sat down and reflected a little more, and then I composed a poem dedicated to Kelly Moody. However, never sent. Never sent. And it so happens that that was a fortuitous decision, because now I have a more auspicious occasion to present it. So this poem, with your indulgence, is a tribute to Kelly Moody. Good catch, Kelly. You are quite right. It might get Oakmont all uptight. It could be thought as too damn rude, create an upset, ignite a feud. And while we're good with our friend Marty, I'm not so sure about Alderman Starty. Indeed, the print and Oakmont News could well be deemed to light a fuse. And I should really pause to remember what happened to Yvonne van Velder when she wrote to the Kenwood Press My God, did that cause some stress. But I don't mean to here digress or any malcontent express, or certainly not to start a fight, instead to recognize the plight. It's good to know you're here to catch infractions, lines which do not match our policies, some idiocies, and other idiosyncrasies. And God forbid we make a blunder that might go wake us from our slumber. Or better, to avoid mistake, let's keep the news to T and K. So thanks for catching friend Truth Arrow, who sometimes strays from straight and narrow. It's good that you from time to time would put pot stirrers back in line. That's why we have an OVA, protect our members from dismay, avoiding notes inflammatory, which might be deemed defamatory. You've hearkened to your boss, Patricia, who runs her Montswell armed militia, directs OV administration, just like a clockwork railroad station. As many here might like to discern, I tell you what, we're going to miss it. So to conclude, I'll give more thought to learn the lesson you have taught. Restrict my verse to that not fraught with words which might make some distraught. Avoid critique that might perversely end up causing controversy, or words that might give offense, even though they're common sense. So Kelly, this poem is just for you, a tribute for all the work that you do. I know it is no easy task to keep your cool with all we ask. And now you have the news online, for which I'm sure you'll find the time. So thank you, Kelly, for all you do, and tell you how much we appreciate it.
So much for diversions as far as the president's comments are concerned. The next item on our agenda is 12D, and that is acting to put in place on a regular basis, funded by the operating fund, the video online coverage of our monthly board meetings and the video online coverage and recording of our annual meeting. The Communications Committee would like to go farther, and it may be appropriate in the future to do that. But I would ask the board to consider approving, making a motion to approve a $50 monthly expense for the use of Oakmont Video Productions equipment and a monthly videographer personal services contract with Gary Pickering for $200 a month to do the recording and editing hours that are involved in putting this online and making it available in our video library. So there'd be a total expenditure of $3,500 a year for this process. We began the experiment with our annual meeting this year, and we've had good reports about it. We've had our meetings reach people who weren't able to be here, both online and in subsequent recordings. And so I think it's time for us to decide whether or not we want to properly compensate for that service. So could I have a motion to approve the $3,500 annual expenditure from the operating fund for videography services related to our monthly board meetings and the association's annual meeting?
Yeah, I'll move. I have a question. That one.
Second?
I'll second.
I believe Dutch told us one time that he could, they have a facility to know exactly how many people are viewing this on any time. Is this, I don't know, Dutch is, okay. Is this still true, Dutch? Okay. I would just like to suggest that we approve this for a period of time, maybe a year or something, but if by his count, we're only getting 3 or 4 or 5 a month viewing it, then I'm going to question that So I would just suggest we do this for a year and then see how it goes. That's,
Do you have any comments on what it's been so far, Dutch?
I haven't looked lately. The most we had was one meeting 2 or 3 ago that there were 47 people that watched the streaming video. The recorded videos get many, many more because they're up there permanently, and so it grows as time goes on. 100, 150 views of a video, not at all unusual.
That answers my question, right on.
I can keep you posted, but I totally agree with you that we should do it for a period of time. And I mean, it's not a permanent. It's not working. It's not working.
Thank you. Any other question?
I see that this would include our annual meeting, our board meetings, and I'd like to add candidates night. That was one of the original ones that was streamed.
We can certainly amend them all.
John, $250 a month times 12 is $3,000. So adding the other 2 meetings brings it up to $3,500.
oh, there you go.
Good math.
I wanted to make you aware that I've been talking to Scott Bissey at the Oakmont Gardens, and they're in the middle of doing some remodeling, and on the basis of the probability that we would be able to stream, they're going to coordinate, if they can, a large room with a large screen where they can, everyone can go down to that room and view the board meetings and the annual meetings at the Oakmont Gardens on a screen similar, maybe not quite that large, but similar to the one we have here in an auditorium style.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question now. Regarding the streaming, I think that's a great idea, and it's a fantastic way of getting the meetings out to a lot of our fellow Oakmonters. As far as the recording, do we have any kind of legal problem, requirement as far as maintaining our board meeting on digital media recorded like that?
Once it's recorded, you have to keep it, and one of the commitments you have to make is as your technology changes, as in from floppy to hard disk to now CD and whatever, you will need to move that forward. But because your Oakmont website is an online website, it will continue to move forward. So that which is there and captured there will suffice and will meet the law.
Okay.
All in favor? We have one abstention. No. Passes unanimously. Thank you. And thank you, Dutch and Gary and everybody else that worked on this. Little by little, an active senior community becomes more visible and more active thanks to the retired talent that we have among us. Item 13E is the appointment of an ad hoc committee. Pardon me, 12E. I've got the wrong numbers and the wrong words here. Thank you. Item 12E is a proposed ad hoc committee to do the narrative, graphic, and photographic input that is needed for the new 2014 Oakmont Community Directory and Resource Guide. Alex Belteff has agreed to be the coordinator of the talented contributors, and Ed Bain, Jim Brewer, Pat Brigham, Richard Duncan, Yvonne Frauenfelder have agreed to be the working team that will begin to put together the narrative material that will go in front of this new 8.5 by 11 8.5 by 11 spiral bound directory. May I have a motion to approve the proposed ad hoc committee? Moved by John Felton, seconded by Fran. Discussion?
John, you mentioned spiral.
sample we have is from Sun City Lincoln Hills. It doesn't have the spiral binding that would be in there, but the spiral binding enables a book like this to be laid open flat so that you don't have to keep your hand in the page. Item 13A is I beg your pardon, going too fast. Call the question. Call the question. All in favor? Motion passes. Thank those committee people again for the time that they're going to be putting in August, September, and October to prepare this, because the input deadline for the publisher is November the 1st for a directory distribution in February of 2014. And the information that goes in there will also be available online. Item 13A, East Rec Center showers, toilets, reconstruction, and repairs. We have now got a certified clearance that all the contamination that was found at the East Rec locker rooms has been repaired. And so we now have a destructed set of showers and toilets. And what we need to do is have an architect help us with the design requirements that are necessary to put it back in proper working condition, and in a way by improving the ventilation and the drainage that avoids a repeat of the problem that has developed over 27 years since the East Rec Center was developed. The Facility Improvement Committee designated two of their representatives, Tina Daly and Tom Conley, to meet with architectural representatives from Glass Architects and from Architectural Dimensions, along with Kim Fowle, our maintenance manager, and me, walk through the site to take a look at what was involved there, and in turn to present proposals to us for the remediation and redecorating and so forth that it's called. The Facility Improvement Committee made a recommendation that we employ Architectural Dimensions to do this work, and they transmitted that recommendation to the board along with the report, the proposals from Architectural Dimensions and from Glass. As I reported at our executive session, the board got into negotiations about these two contracts and came to the conclusion that the Architectural Dimensions, while certainly was well qualified, as was Glass, the Architectural Dimensions proposal is about 20% more expensive than Glass. And therefore, we chose to bring at today's meeting the proposal to award to Glass Architects of Santa Rosa the contract to do a schematic design and study of what needs to be done to those east locker rooms. And their proposal is for $8,425. Do I have a motion to approve this proposal from Glass for $8,425?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. I may be mistaken here, but I think, aren't you going for both phases?
I believe we may want to go to both phases, but we need to see what he comes up with on the first.
All right, I see what you're saying. Okay, because you had it in here for both. I'm sorry, I apologize. At least I did read the material.
Before we vote, maybe, can we entertain a question?
We'll get there. Do I have a motion to, Evelyn moved, John Felton second. Do we have questions from the board? Do we have comments from the audience? Microphone. Thank you.
If I may.
Your name, please?
My name is Mark Panley.
Mark, thank you.
I live at 154 Mountain Vista Circle. For the board and committee here, I have a quick question. Is there anyone that uses the pools amongst you? Is there anyone that goes to the pool with any frequency? Thank you. Firstly, well, I'll end with a brief question, but I did want to say I frequent the pools regularly, and there's a feeling that the care about repair of the locker rooms at the East Pool and the sauna at this pool is not taken seriously by the board, nor by Oakmont in general. And I'd like to hear if that's the case. But also, coming in late here, and also, all of these things that are maintenance of regular things that should be in good repair, is there a way to structure it where in the future if this happens, votes aren't required? I mean, I think the population of Oakmont, the homeowners, would approve a committee that can act more expediently in gaining approvals from boards and committees, because there's been a lot of displeasure and feeling that people have everyday routines, that exercise that's necessary for medical reasons and a number of things, where things that are critical to the people of Oakmont are not taken seriously. And I believe it's 5 months, or certainly 4 months, that those locker rooms have been down, or 1 or 2 of them. And I'm not speaking on my own behalf, but wanting the board and those involved here to know how things just grow into an extremely negative feeling by the pool users.
Thank you for your comment.
And my question is, the motion that's up now, is it somewhat expedient to get things done, or is this a 2-step process in the motion?
I believe the motion involves taking the next step. The problem that we ran into there was, first of all, a platform stool attached to the wall in the women's shower facilities pulled off the wall, and it exposed some mold and contamination. As an association, we're required to treat that very seriously, and unfortunately, treating something like that seriously is time consuming, because first of all, you've got to have a chemical analysis of what the condition is. When you find out that it's adverse, you have to correct it. Then you have to have a chemical analysis that you've successfully done the correction. And then you have to have appropriate advice on how to keep that situation from occurring in the future by making changes in the way the facility was initially built 27 years ago. And we're going through that step-by-step process, and it's agonizing as hell, because there are just many things in meeting our responsibilities that need to be addressed. And spending money is one of those things we have to approve. There are many maintenance items. For instance, the compressors at the West Rec Center in 2 of the air conditioning machines had to be taken care of, and we concluded we could do that administratively. But when you get into structural issues like we're facing in the East, it takes more than just that kind of maintenance administrative action. So I apologize for the inconvenience, and I apologize for the frustration, but it's there.
Well, thank you for the thorough answer. I want to stand by the comment I made a few moments ago that the board should look at structuring things so that repairs to items that are more or less in the foundation, so to speak, of Oakmont, depended on by the people, that there is a more expedient method put in place to take care of this. And I say that in full appreciation of the seriousness, but I do believe by pre-addressing such a thing, it can be addressed much more promptly. And I also believe that there should be a forum in some manner of soliciting feedback from the people who use the portions of Oakmont that need repair, more of a consensus-oriented or a seeking of feedback from folks so that there's a greater connection between the people of Oakmont and the Board of Directors.
Thank you. I can assure you, though, that my telephone and my email box and the other members of the board have not lacked for input from people concerned about the subject.
But I do, and that's good, and my consciousness is raised here about your concern. But I'm still very much committed to the thought that things could be done more expediently with some thought applied to them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Noted. We have a ready to approve this motion. Art?
Thank you. Art Booth, Chairman of FIC, Facilities Improvement. The procedure hasn't been truly followed, unfortunately, because FIC were commissioned to look into the problems with the east-west, which we did. That took place prior to a monthly meeting on the 2nd of July, at which time FIC voted in favor of architectural dimensions. Following the procedure, the recommendation has been forwarded to the Finance Committee. That's where it's at the moment. And now I find that the board are already voting on that recommendation. I can't understand why this has taken place. It shouldn't be in front of the board at this moment. Thank you.
I appreciate your observations, but I think Mr. Kaiser pointed out that sometimes there are situations that need remediation more quickly than waiting for another group. And there's no question that we're going to go ahead and spend the money to do this job. And so the board had it on its agenda today in order to try to avoid some of the further delays that we often face with essential projects. Call for the question. All in favor of the awarding to Glass preliminary study phase for completing the work at the East Rec Center shower and locker rooms for $8,425. One abstention from Herm Herman. Motion passes. You want to comment?
I found out that the principal owner of the Architecture Dimensions happens to be the son of one of my best friends, and I felt I wanted to stay out of that issue.
Thank you. Because the association policies call for the appointment of a project coordinator in connection with either design projects over $5,000 or construction projects over $25,000, I put item 13B on the agenda for the purpose of taking action to appoint Director Felton as the project coordinator under the association policy for following through with Glass Architects and the design work that needs to be done in this project. Do I have a motion to appoint Felton as project coordinator? Herman Hess? Fran Felton. Thank you, Fran.
What pay is attached to this, John?
I wish there were some. Couldn't pay me.
All in favor? Thank you. Item 13C, it's our biggest item on the agenda today. It has to do with taking the next step as far as design development for the central building project is concerned. Archeologics has completed the first phase under its contract for the schematic proposal of the building that's pictured in an L shape over there, which not only includes OVA offices, but association activity rooms. It also includes work on the pool equipment building, as shown in blue on the chart over there. So the next phase, in accordance with their contract, which was approved last February, is for detailed design, development, and construction drawings for $67,500. Do I have a motion to authorize Phase 3 of Archeologic's February 28th contract? Jim Kaiser. Do we have a second? John Felton, second. Discussion?
Yes. Does this mean that that this board has approved this plan as what we're going to go forward with?
It means that we are approving the concept that you see. There are changes that the design team gets involved with. What kind of roof are we going to have? Are we going to have a platform or a stage in the L frame? Is the entry going to be for offices in the orange section rather than the yellow section? What kind of a roof are we going to have? What kind of siding treatment are we going to have? These are the elements of the detailed design. But basically, we're approving the concept.
But you were approving the concept of having this L shape with the yellow portion backed up to the pool. We're approving that concept.
Yes.
Okay. I violently disagree with that concept. I'm probably the only one in the world that does, perhaps, but it is the wrong concept entirely. And I'll point out why. When this was brought to by Archeologics to the 2 sessions we had here, one of their major points was that this was then to be provided, this was going to be a center, that was going to be the centerpiece of this whole development. What they've done then is put the office right in the middle of this centerpiece. That is no place for an office to be. The office should not be in the center, it should be in periphery. In addition to that, they've blocked off, by putting this building where it is, they've blocked off any convenient access between the CAC and Berger. There should be some method of a pathway closer to the pool. They've directed what's left of the greensward so that the emphasis on that greensward is towards the parking lot. It seems to me that that's the wrong way for it to be. This building should at least be reversed completely so that the office building would be towards the parking lot. The multi-use room, the conference room, what have you, would be closer to the existing pool. There should be some, this is my opinion, there should be some sort of a walkway that would feed between the CAC over to Berger, so that you tie all of those activity centers together. Remember that what we're trying to do here is provide activity centers. Our basic goal and our charter says that we are to provide recreational facilities for our residents. We are putting our office right in the middle of all of these recreational facilities and not having any access between the CAC and the Berger without going out to the sidewalk. I just think the entire concept as it's presented is wrong, and I certainly cannot vote for going ahead with this as long as that is the only concept that we are considering.
Other board comment?
Well, I'm not sure that we've actually adopted this particular layout. This particular item is the symmetrical switching equipment, and no matter how the building is laid out, it's still going to exist within the building. So the design of the switchgear.
Pardon me, I believe that you're looking at 13 Delta, and we're talking about 13 Charlie.
I stand corrected.
No other board comments?
Yes.
Oh,
I think that Herm's idea is perhaps feasible, because this design is not written in stone, but it is a concept now that has some flexibility, and it has some area for input from our citizens, from our board, from any of our residents who have objections to it. But it's a great starting point, and I think the overall concept, which we'll be incorporating, and if you will notice, that it will really reduce our overall construction costs, because one common wall will be that of the office building as well as the common wall for the cabana. This is a tremendous financial savings to us. But flipping it is, we can change the office perhaps for the meeting room, reverse those positions. This is all subject to change, and I think that, again, we're open and the architects are open for suggestions and ideas.
But not if we were adopting this as the concept that we are going with.
The concept can't be changed. With this approval, they can be more flexible, Herm. They can adjust and change just what you're talking about. They could move the entry and the office building to the sidewalk side and put the meeting room on the other end, which is closer to the entrance of the pool. This is not a major problem. This is why I'm suggesting to you, I've also spoken with them with perhaps some of these changes. Our architects are saying, yes, this is feasible.
Evelyn, I want to be sure that your comments are not misunderstood by the audience. Archeologics has completed their design work. This is what we paid them to do. If we want a completely different design along the lines that Herm is talking about, we've got to go back to the design stage and pay them for a different design. If we approve this motion to go to phase 3, it includes the kind of floor plan that you're looking at over there. It doesn't mean we can't move the furniture around inside and have the office portion be, rather than in the yellow area, over to the orange area. But it does mean that the orange area is where it is, and the yellow area is where it is, and the blue area is where it is. I'm not saying your comments are wrong, I just don't want us to feel that we're going to get Archeologics to go back and do a new concept by not going to this third phase. We are at a point that we are obligated to present to the developers of the meadows a construction alternative. If we don't proceed along the path of developing that construction alternative design, we risk losing the construction money that they're required to put in to a construction alternative. And if we want to say, no, we're not going to go to phase 3 of this existing contract, we have to face up to the question of where are we going to provide a construction alternative to the developers of the meadow property. They have a commitment not only to decide whether or not they're going to do it for us or pay us cash. If they decide they're going to do it for us, we have to give them a building to build, and they have to complete that by May of 2015, at the time that our office contract for a lease expires. So I don't want anybody in the audience to be confused about this motion. This motion says go ahead with that essential floor plan. And so Herm's objections, he doesn't like that. And so we feel clear that we know what he's saying.
John, in summation, can we basically say that what we're approving here is the footprint, that we may change things within what's within the various buildings, move them around?
Very definitely. You can change the appearance of the exterior facade. You can change the roof. You can do lots of those kinds of things. But you're talking about this conceptual.
Okay.
Nancy?
I'm now a member of the FIC. I was not a member, and maybe I didn't pay close enough attention to when this started, although I thought I did. Was Archaeologics decided to be the designer, the architect, and so on through the whole entire process back in, what'd you say, February, whenever it got started? Or I don't know, whether the FIC was even consulted about this building. My understanding is the board totally bypassed the FIC in preparing any of this and just took it on themselves.
The board assigned the process of developing a construction alternative to the OCDC subcommittee that worked with the developer regarding this contract, and the board asked them to follow through with a contract for the design of a proposed building.
So the
yes, it bypassed the FIC.
So the FIC had nothing to do with it at all?
Right.
So then my other next question is Archaeologics the only possible designer for this project forever?
No, we can throw them out and go out to design development from an entirely new contract. Nothing requires us to go to phase 3 of their existing contract.
Okay. I don't totally agree with Herm, but I think he's mostly on more the right track. I personally think this design stinks. I think it's a waste of money. I don't think it's designed well. It cuts off the CAC from the burger and the rest of the area, cuts off the light and the views from the FAC, the CAC, the exercise space. By the meeting rooms, they plunked on the end. I just don't think it's a good thing to do.
Thank you.
Bob Giddings again, J.C. Lane. I know I can't convince anybody on the board or in the audience that disagrees with me, but when I came to the meeting where Archaeologic and John made a presentation of these schematics, I was very impressed. I refer to it as kind of the Swiss Army knife building because it accomplishes so much. It puts in the switchgear room back away from sight. It gives us the cabana wall that somebody else pointed out here very inexpensively. It gives us additional meeting rooms that can't be cut off, or that can be cut off from the administrative part, so we can use bathrooms, meeting rooms, and a conference room also in the evenings or on weekends. And there are several other points I can't remember right now, but I want to also mention the context that we've spent a good part of this meeting talk about experts and their opinions, and seismic and structural issues on other of our buildings. And then we consult a professional firm, just like all the other firms we've consulted for advice and guidance. And they have no, quote, skin in the game except their own contract, of course. And they come up with a design that was not there to wipe out a greensward or diminish the look of Berger or the CAC. And they came up with this. And I think it deserves a good, strong look from all of us in an open mind, because it accomplishes so much in one building. I wish I brought my list. I didn't expect this conversation today. But I would like people to recognize the efficiency of this building and what usefulness it'll bring to us in the near future. Thank you.
Noah Lyons, Hillsdale Drive. A couple of things. I want to first comment to John's remark about the timetable. It seems like if the board continues down the path of that they're looking at for locker rooms or West Rec, we do have a project that can take advantage of the construction offer from the Meadows developer. And so I don't think we want to get stampeded into this project because of that other issue with the Meadows developer. As far as this goes, I tend to agree with Bob that it's a marvelous solution that they came up with for a first pass. And I don't think it's the best solution we could come to. And this is a major project of the central gem of, the central heart of Oakmont. And to commit to a design phase at this point when we have not looked at taking one more pass and say, Archaeologic, my God, you really opened our eyes to what you can do. But what more could you do if we looked at, for example, are all of the parts of the CAC being used the best way they should be used? Or should we be swapping things out? Is it possible, for example, that some of the recreational items move to the front of the building and the office move back to, say, where the cards and the computer rooms are? I don't know, but I think that it's short-sighted to not ask those questions before we commit to this kind of a project. Another example I'll raise, and then turn the mic over. The lobby that we had plans when CAC was developed how that lobby would be used. It's really underutilized because there's nobody there to staff it. There's a lot of things that people would like to do, have some kind of welcome thing. There's no way to staff it. If we asked Archeologic to say, come up with a way that we can have our office, but also have office people who can be welcoming people to Oakmont or welcoming to the CAC because there's a staff person there. We haven't asked that question, so we don't know whether or not we can do that. Those are questions I'd like to see the community have a chance to address before you commit to a design phase. Thank you.
Barbara Robinson, Oak Trail Circle. I'm going to ditto a lot of what's been said, so rather than continue to say the same thing, I agree with the fact that it's a beautiful concept, but I don't agree with the fact that it's the concept that we need and as functional as possible for here. I also want to ask, and I may have missed it, so I apologize if I did, but where's the input box? Where's the part, have you received feedback? Has this, because I know I just saw this in the newspaper. Now, if it was in there before, I apologize, I haven't been here, so I've been away, but if I missed it before, I apologize, but I don't see it here either. I mean, isn't this where we should, as the community, be giving input and writing it down, and where is that?
Not sure I understand your question.
The input as far as your pictures. I mean, whenever we've had any other kind of concept or any other kind of drawing or any of that.
An idea box?
Where's that?
We didn't put one up.
Okay, and was this the first time it was in the paper? Just this last newspaper that just came out?
It's the first time in the newspaper.
Okay, and now, which means it just came out on the 15th? 2 days ago. Okay, so it just came out on the 15th. This is the first time actually Oakmont residents have had a chance to visualize this. No?
We had 2 open meetings.
Okay, I apologize then. I apologize if people have seen it before.
Back in June.
And that was when there was time for everyone to give. And did you get feedback? Are you getting positive feedback about this already?
We had 49 people come to the afternoon session. We had 19 people come to the evening session. And both the West and the Central were talked about at both of those sections. And we got input. I was terribly disappointed that people didn't take an interest in it at that time. We're getting a lot more interest in it today than people coming to the meeting when we tried to have the architects explain their concepts.
Okay. And then I know that Noel brought it up as well. What happened to the meadows and that part? Wasn't that supposed to be something about an office? The contractors who had that?
What has been suggested?
This is what this is. Okay, thanks. Sorry to have to make you go back a little bit, just catching up.
Very good.
Okay, and then I would also like to make just one other quick comment. Okay, not asking if I may, I'm going to make the comment. Harm, I appreciate what you wrote on your editorial. So, and Patricia, I agree. I believe you will be sorely missed as well.
Bringing it back to the board then, we have a motion made and seconded for the $67,500 third phase. Jerry, go ahead.
Jerry Goffrath, I'm a member of the FIC committee. I would like to know what has happened to the RFQ. The FIC committee has been working on this for months. What has happened to that?
As far as I know, we've received no recommendation from the FIC for an RFQ.
We should be voting on that very soon, right? the RFQ. The request for qualifications, and John, I will let you explain that to the audience. But
The Finance Committee, Jerry is talking about the fact that the Finance Committee undertook, at the recommendation of Jack Linhart, who was a member of the committee at the time and has now moved to the south, that Oakmont might benefit from having under contract a consulting engineer architectural firm. And so they put out a request for qualifications to the general industry to have those kinds of qualifications submitted to be a consultant.
Correct. John?
They have been evaluating those to the best of my knowledge and have not made a recommendation.
That went to the FIC, not the Finance Committee.
FIC, I'm sorry, my tongue tied. The FIC has been doing this, and the FIC, to my knowledge, has not made a recommendation as a result of their work.
because we were interviewing people, we had 9 applicants, 9 firms. We chose 3, Archeologic, Glass, and AD. And we are now, I would say, getting very close to recommending one. But yet, you and the board, or all the board, have decided to go with Archeologics on the west and on the central. You've chosen them to do the drawings. Why not get the RFQ in place and let these people help us look at the whole of Oakmont, all of our facilities, all which need help, and let us get another opinion? What is wrong with that? Why keep going back to Archeologics? Can't we get another set of eyes?
I think the only way I can answer is we can always get another set of eyes. But the work that Archeologics has been doing relative to this project and relative to the West preceded anything forthcoming regarding the consultant concept. And, you know, as our speaker earlier in the afternoon said, you know, things are taking a hell of a long time to get done. We need to get work done. And so we are continuing in this proposal simply another phase of a contract that was approved on February 28th.
But you did this without going through the FIC.
That's right.
On all of them. Why are we here? Why do we have committees?
Maybe we can have that discussion another day. It
Well-
doesn't influence our decision.
Well, we have wasted months of work. I can't understand what we're here for.
Call for the question on the motion to approve Phase 3 of Archeologics contract, $67,500 for design development, followed by construction drawings. All in favor? I count 6, 1. Thank you. The contract is approved. In addition to this contract, we face the question of the transformer and the switch equipment that's located in the cage in the parking lot. When the forensic analysis was done, they identified the need to replace that 60-year-old gear. In that process, the board considered having Axis also do the electrical engineering work involved in the relocation of the transformer and the switching equipment. At one of the planning meetings involving the Plaza project, where all the parties from Axis and their subcontractor, the electrical engineer, and Hogan Land Services, and the landscape architect, and so forth were in attendance. The discussion came up about including the electric switchgear in the reconstruction of a central building. And the electrical contractor, Hansmeyer, associated with the Axis firm, said as long as you're doing that, I should withdraw my contract responsibility for doing the electric switchgear and that should be done by the electrical engineer that's working on the building. When I talked to Archeologics about that particular component of their work on this third phase, they said we can do it two ways. We can have the electrical engineer, Ray Slaughter, who is part of our team for the electric requirements of the proposed new central building, do that work under our contract. But, in fairness, we have to administer that and put on an overhead fee. We would be willing to consider him as a member of our team to continue to do the basic work for the building, but you could be pennies ahead or nickels or dollars ahead by contracting with him independently to do the electric switchgear work, which includes the design of the equipment and the routing and trenching of the cables that connect that equipment to our burger auditorium and the pool structure and the central. And so I have asked Ray Slaughter, as a member of their team, to provide us an independent proposal. So item 13D is what we would consider approving for the electrical work that I've just described regarding the transformer and switchgear for $5,500. If you feel that it's inappropriate to do it as a separate contract, then we'll have to add it, have Archeologics add it for a slightly higher. And I don't know what that fee is, but you can roughly add a 10% over. So do I have a motion to approve the contract with Ray Slaughter and Associates to do the electrical engineering identified in the forensic study for the transformer and electric switch?
For $5,500.
For $5,500.
So moved.
Moved by Jim, seconded by Fran. Discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Motion is approved. It's now reached the point that with this central building project, we need to have a project coordinator, and because of the size of the project, a project coordination team. And Stan Hendrickson, who was a member of the project coordination work for the Central Activity Center, has agreed to be the coordinator for the work going forward on this and the kind of adjustments that may have to be made within that design. Pat Amadeo has agreed to participate. Bob Giddings have agreed to participate. I think Don Green, who agreed to participate, may have some reservations. No reservations. Then I would propose, as you see in 13E and F, that we appoint a project coordinator and a design development team consisting of Stan Hendrickson, Don Green, Pat Amadeo, Bob Giddings. Moved by Jim, seconded by Herm Hess. All in favor? Motion passed. We're now down to a future board meeting agenda recommendations. I have noted here that we have a tabled item to come back to regarding the structural corrections at West. Do we have other things, Mr. Secretary? Nothing more?
Question.
Yes.
Down at the bottom of our agenda, we have items being tracked for future attention, but not included in this agenda. And we have dates alongside these two items. Introduced July 13 on both these two items.
I don't know.
Item number 1, inventory and develop policy privately owned items stored in, that's been on for at least 18 months.
Can the staff help us with that? I don't know what we do there.
Well, that was a project that we started that got stymied. There were a number of volunteers, Carol Cotton, Yeppa Yule, and some of the others who went out with the prior facilities maintenance manager and me, and we started trying to identify who has some of the mysterious cabinets and what are in them. And we got bogged down with other projects, so it is at a standstill until it gets pulled back up again. We've inventoried, labeled, and tagged all of the OVA-owned stuff, but we have a lot of things that we don't know who owns them, and we have a lot of locked cabinets that we don't know if anything is in them and who owns the padlocks.
And that's addressed in your manager's report, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yes, I was thinking.
So until, I mean...
I was only commenting on this date, July 13. I don't know how that got there.
I think that's just a process typo, because we move things around to make the agenda fit. I mean, I think that's just, it just got slipped. Both of those are older than today's date.
One-page agendas have their limitations.
John, over here. On future agenda recommendations, I'm not sure whether this would go there or it would go to a workshop, but we need to talk about the East Deck Rec.
The East Rec Deck. Yes.
East Rec Deck.
That's a future agenda item. I'll put it down. And thank you for your exploratory work along with Jim on this. Jim Pike.
One other possible agenda item, what have we done about, we published the procedures for the committee procedures, I believe. When is that coming on the agenda? Next month. And are we going to settle the liaison situation at that time?
I hope so.
Okay, thank you.
There being no other items brought forward, we're going to adjourn to executive session. And the only items on the executive session agenda involve some collection referrals for action.
I will be bringing up a personnel item today. An executive session.
Thank you. Stand adjourned.